He was stubborn, he was willful, he was a good kid by all estimates, but he had a rebellious streak, which I think, sort of carries through for the rest of his life and is essentially why he got the title of a maverick.
Maverick. It's a label that Senator John McCain earned at a young age, and one that his biographer, Elaine Povich, says brought him from the cockpit of a Navy fighter jet to a seat in the U.S. Senate.
He was absolutely destined to become a Navy man. His father was an admiral, his grandfather was an admiral. He is John Sidney McCain III. In some ways he rebelled against that, and a lot of that is his nature. He didn't really want to be told what to do, so he was a bit of a rebellious son. However, not so rebellious that he didn't fulfill the mission. He went to the Naval Academy. He graduated, as he likes to say, fifth from the bottom of the class, which was more about getting a bunch of demerits as he went through than it was about anything else. He never quite got enough demerits to get kicked out. He was very careful about that.
After graduating, McCain enlisted in the Navy and was sent to fly bombing missions in Vietnam.
He was stationed on the USS Forrestal, which is a large aircraft carrier which experienced a terrible fire in which a number of Navy men died and many others were severely burned. He survived that fire, and he was reposted to another aircraft carrier, I believe it was the Oriskany, and he started flying missions over Vietnam from that.
It wasn't long before McCain faced peril again. On October 26, 1967, while flying a bombing mission, McCain's jet was shot down by a missile over Hanoi. McCain was ejected from the plane, fracturing both arms and a leg, and landed in a lake. He was pulled ashore by some of the Vietnamese and taken to a prison, known as the Hanoi Hilton, where he would spend more than 5 years in a cell.
His treatment as a POW was particularly awful, especially when they figured out who he was, and they thought that they could get information out of him. They called him the Prince of the Navy and the Prince of the U.S., and he was tortured, he was beaten, he was mistreated, he did not get the medical attention that he needed. He survived all that, and he maintained his sense of humor, which was amazing given the circumstances.
McCain had a chance to escape the brutal prison, but the Maverick decided not to take the easy way out.
He was offered an early release, and the code of the Navy is that, and the code of all POWs for the United States is that it's first in, first out. So the longest serving prisoner was the one who should have been released first, and they adhered to that code. And McCain was not the longest serving prisoner, and he simply denied the opportunity to be released early because he did not want to violate that code.
McCain was eventually released on March 14, 1973. He sustained permanent damage from his injuries, and Povich says his time in captivity all but broke his spirit.
He likes to say that I fell in love with my country when I was a prisoner in someone else's. I think also he learned humility and humbleness. He was completely dependent on his fellow prisoners to feed him and nurse him back to health, and that does tend to humble the most arrogant, if you'll say, of hotshot flyers.
Although McCain regained flight status, his injuries prevented him from piloting like he used to. So he became the Navy's liaison to the Senate, lobbying for the Navy and forming relationships with senators like Joe Biden. He also cultivated an interest in politics, and when a House seat opened up in Arizona's 1st District, McCain jumped.
He was charged as a carpetbagger because he was new to the state, he wasn't really from there, and how could they trust him? And he was asked that question over and over and over again. And one day at a town meeting of some kind, at a forum, he just about lost it. And he said, pal, and he calls all the people pal, pal, you may have the luxury of growing up in the same place in Arizona all of your life, he said, but we're a Navy family. We moved around a lot. We followed my father, and before that my grandfather. We lived in all places all over the country and in fact all over the world. And he said, now that I think of it, the longest place I ever lived was Hanoi. That put an end to that question.
McCain made it to Congress, and after 2 terms in the House and 2.5 terms in the Senate, the Maverick decided he wanted to shake up the Oval Office.
And he did so in his own fashion, he again using this sort of maverick label, but he did it his own way. He didn't have a lot of money. George W. Bush was the best funded candidate in 2000. He didn't have a lot of money. He didn't have the establishment behind him. So he decided to run, and he used a rather interesting new technique. He embraced the press. He embraced reporters. He jokingly called us my base. But what he did was he talked ceaselessly to reporters. Any reporter who wanted an interview could have one. He rode around on the campaign on something called the Straight Talk Express and claimed he would never lie to you.
In the end, McCain lost the Republican nomination to another former pilot. He tried again in 2008, but ultimately lost to a newcomer, Barack Obama.
By 2008, he was the establishment candidate. He was the Republican Party's nominee, favorite candidate, and a lot of the freewheeling kind of let's go out and put on a show kind of atmosphere had disappeared by that time. That was, I think, in many ways to his detriment. He's much better when he's off the cuff than he is when he's scripted.
McCain spent 6 terms in the Senate. There, the maverick carved his own path, reaching across the aisle to craft bipartisan legislation, breaking party expectations on multiple occasions, and even bringing down the Republicans' troubled plan to repeal and replace Obamacare.
We're getting nothing done, my friends. We're getting nothing done.
He doesn't like to be managed. I think that's putting it mildly. He likes to be his own guy.
In the weeks and months following his brain cancer diagnosis, many asked McCain how he managed to make it through so many challenges and battle a debilitating disease without giving up. In an interview with C-SPAN just 3 months after his diagnosis, McCain said he owes all of his strength and success to luck.
I am the most fortunate person of all the thousands that you have interviewed that you will ever know.